Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have an awesome new review for you from the brand DEKLA. Now, they are out of Germany and their watches are made in Germany. Now, some really interesting aspects about them is really they're a German in-house production paired with, Swiss-made drop-in movements, which I think is pretty great combination, and you've seen a lot of other brands be really successful with that model. Now, this type of watch I consider it a pilot's watch. When you're looking for something along those lines, some key common characteristics and design language are of course going to be just that general balance of legibility and functionality. This particular model is their Turbulenz v.3 in the 6Steel, and this is the 40mm option. Now, this is actually from their tactical watch collection, and it has 4 different dial variations, this being the third. Each kind of has a different pilot style flavor, which I think is great and gives you a lot of different options. I chose this one for the really just that bold minimalist German aesthetic, and it's one of those things where kind of stick indices aren't really owned by anybody, I feel like, but there are quite a few other brands that have really made a name for themselves with those Arabic numerals. Whether it's more on the Flieger style or more on kind of that modern gauge instrument style dial as well. Now, as far as some other options here, you can actually get it in modern Lume or vintage Lume. Also, you can get your choice of seconds hand accent color, which I think is great. So as far as the case goes, you can get it in the 40mm. It comes with the 6Steel, and then in the 42 you can kind of choose to go up to the Pro version, which adds the hardened steel and then also anti-magnetic attributes as well. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys, this is a handsome devil. I mean, I gotta say, just aesthetically, very, very balanced. Of course, you get the no date option, which is outstanding, but there's some really fine details here that I'm very, very impressed with. So let's actually get the camera, let's put it up close. Look at the dimension on that Lume application. It is really thickly and super sharply applied, and this isn't because they ordered it from one of the better dial manufacturers. It's because they produced it in-house, which I think is a really nice touch. You would really be surprised how many brands actually farm out so many different aspects, whether it be the hands, the dial, or the case. Here you're going to get all those things under one house, all quality controlled under the same level, and really just a fine level of attention to detail that you're going to not really find too much in this price range. Speaking of price range, this went for 533 euro, and 61 cents without VAT, and that's as configured. So if you were to configure this same model out, that's what you get. The nice thing is there are quite a few options, so prices may vary whether you do the 42, whether you do the non-hardened steel, etc., etc. So there's a couple different options there, but this has that beautiful matte blasted finish. Basically, it starts out as 316L stainless steel, and basically it's heated in a mixture of carbon gases at precise low temperature to allow diffusion of atoms, and what that results in is 1300 HV on the hardness Vickers scale, which is basically 6 times the hardness of normal stainless steel. So that is quite impressive, and I have to say, I'm digging that, and it definitely gives me a nice feeling of security while it is on wrist. Now, as far as the crystal goes, it's a sapphire. It has a slight double dome to it with inner AR coating, so very legible even at very, very harsh angles. Look at that, still quite nice. You're not getting any distortion, so that's lovely. And then you can see that nice slight dome there, just peeking up, so it does keep relatively thin, although I'd say this is kind of on the thicker side. It is actually 40mm in diameter, but it has the dial pushed all the way out to the edges, so it's going to actually look visually appear quite large. And to compare to like your typical 40mm layout, it has a thickness of 11.7mm and a lug to lug distance of 47.8. So not the smallest footprint, but I think it really fits that really, everyday tactical slash, pilot tool watch vibe. And with it being only 40 millimeters, but having these kind of large aspects like the wider lugs and the wider dial generally really pushed out and shrinking this fixed bezel, as far as the proportions go, it actually gives it a lot of visual punch. And again, it feels like a proper tool watch, not something that's like an everyday watch that happens to have a minimalist aesthetic, which I think is really outstanding. Now, as far as the movement goes, inside, although you can't see it, it's basically either an ETA 2824 or a Sellita SW200, and they regulate these to plus or minus 7 seconds a day. And I gotta say, this thing has been running well within that. You also do have a choice to option at another €150 to get a 2892 dropped in here, which is outstanding. I was really close to choosing that option, but ultimately, because it didn't actually save me any thickness, I decided to just go with the standard movement because they are regulated within the same range. So, that was my choice. It does offer a screw down crown, which is outstanding, and it is signed, not with the DEKLA logo, but from what I can tell, if I dig into my old Stinger gunner days, using visual aircraft recognition, I'd say the silhouette is probably a Eurofighter Typhoon because of that delta shape wing and those kind of forward set canards. But let me know what you think, for all of you aircraft aficionado out there. Maybe you're thinking it could be a Raphael, but I think because of where the canards are set on the hull there, a little bit further up from the delta shape wing, I'm thinking Eurofighter Typhoon. But hey, that's just a little fun from my old Marine Corps days. All right, so yeah, this thing is sweet. The case back is solid and engraved. It has a really interesting look to it there, as you can see. And I dig it. It's not over the top, it's minimalist, but it does show that, hey, this all kind of does tie together. Also, you can see the strap is this really beautiful Rios strap, very nicely done. And then they do have the matching DEKLA hardware. This is a non-tapering strap, so it starts at 20 millimeters and stays at 20 millimeters. It's quite thick, so it definitely, on this, it just gives you that aviator vibe, I would say, because of just the general aesthetic, the thickness, the feel of it. And then the nice thing is, because it is, I guess visually quite a thick, robust looking piece, the strap really feels right at home. It doesn't feel overly thick or anything like that. It feels like, hey, this is what should be on a tool watch. Me, I will probably end up putting it on, some type of textile strap. But I do like this two-piece configuration, and I have to say it is quite of high quality. Now, in terms of this dial, guys, let's just take a minute to appreciate this. It is all printed indices. It's matte black. There is no date. It does have pretty much everything painted and loomed in terms of the hands, but the seconds hand is actually not loomed. But honestly, when we get to the loom shots and the light transition, you will see that it doesn't really need to be, because the loom on here blasts. It is so thickly applied, it's insane. And the crazy thing is, it's really thickly applied, but when you just look at it at a glance, it doesn't look like some globby mess. I mean, it is very thickly applied, but also very finely applied. Very, very high execution and precision at this level. Another nice thing to note, if I haven't already mentioned, is this has 20 bar of water resistance. So down to 200 meters, you got that screw down crown. This thing is pretty much ready for any adventure, whether, kind of air, land, and sea. It's got you covered. So it's got the hardened case, it's got the water resistance, sapphire. It's extremely robust. So with all that said, let's actually get this piece on wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, wears really, really well. It might even appear a little bit large just because of the dimensions combined with the kind of that aspect ratio on here. When you think about the way everything kind of plays, when you think about that really large all dial type of style. And then of course you do get the slightly wider lugs. They're rounded and not squared off, which is nice because I think it all really just ties together visually. I love that matte, you know, finish there, the way it holds the light and just offers you a little bit of color play and some nice tonal shifts. And of course the strap does go really quite well with that dial. The way the matte black ties in, I think, is really great. And as you can see on my wrist, it's not small, but it's not this big protruding kind of awkward old school Flieger case. It's something that's more modern. It's really meant to be quite ergonomic, and I think they do a great job with that. So yeah, this thing wears really well, as you would expect. Underneath you can see the clasp there, the nice buckle, and of course it is that you know, matching matte finish as well, which is great. And I gotta say, this thing has been rather tough in my experience so far, but I'm really glad to kind of share it with you because it's a little bit, you know, I'd say a little bit out there. It's not something that's super mainstream, but I think it's quite eye-catching, and of course it has some really great merits in terms of its build quality and fit and finish. So with that said, let's actually move into some Lume shots and low light transition for some closing thoughts. Okay guys, I couldn't resist swapping it out onto a nylon strap. Here we actually have this really nice strap code single pass military style strap, and I think again it just ties in to that pilot's vibe really well, and also within kind of that tactical space versus maybe feeling more like just an everyday minimalist watch. I think here you get more of that military aesthetic soaking through, and because it's single pass, it doesn't add a whole lot of heft. But with that said, let's actually shut off the lights here and check out that Lume. Guys, the BGW9 on here is insane. Look at those hands and that dial. It just pops. There's a lot on there, so honestly this thing does take a charge. So when you wear this out and essentially you're, you know, it just really briefly just walking out to your car and then you come back to your doorway where it's a little bit darker, you're gonna see this thing really light up. I was very, very impressed with the Lume. The crazy thing is I was impressed by the application as well as the actual brightness, which are often a bit of a trade-off. You can get something a little bit thicker, but essentially a little sloppy. Look, you can even see the unlumed seconds hand because of how bright the Lume is on there. And again, this isn't a dive watch, although it does have quite a bit of water resistance. Now, one thing I like to work in, of course, is that low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight like my hot studio lights are going to kind of recreate. A lot of the times you're going to be coming in and out of a building, maybe walking underneath an overhang or spending time in your favorite vehicle. So I do like to get an idea of how the colors and textures in the finish are going to render in less than optimal lighting, as well as maybe even some purposely harsh lighting. As you can see here, oh, was that a little speck of dust? Let's put it to the test, guys. Is the dust under the dial or on top of the crystal? There you go. In-house, guys. DEKLA. Big props on just the level. I mean, it's so easy to get lost in the simplicity of this type of setup, but also it's so easy to have a huge eyesore by having any type of imperfection underneath that distortion-free crystal and that beautifully matte dial with all of its simple and, you know, very proportionate and just wonderful lines that you have here. So really nice. I love the way the light plays off of this case. You know, it gives you a couple different tones of that satin, and you can see in that mixed lighting here, the transitional, still amazingly legible, guys. Look at that BGW9 just pumping away. Really beautiful, even as the camera has to kind of adjust with the light and the dark. You can still get a really great idea of how this thing is going to look, wear, and render in terms of legibility. So very, very nice from that standpoint, guys. Closing thoughts on the wrist. Of course, you have those classic proportions. You know, it definitely is a pilot's watch that doesn't feel over or undersized. That large open dial add a lot of visual impact and presence. It definitely has that more modern Flieger aesthetic, which I can definitely vibe with, except it's actually super overbuilt in terms of its capabilities with 200 meters of water resistance, which is outstanding. As far as model variants, again, we kind of talked about it, guys. There's 4 different dial options, really something for anybody who's a fan of either German watches or pilot's watches. You're going to find something that you enjoy within those options, and then you also get to go with either kind of that vintage toned warm lume or here the cool toned modern lume. So you have a lot of choices. Now, as far as comparable models go, guys, this is, of course, I'd say close to something like a Zen 556, or the 856, or the Damasco DS30, which I have and I love. Actually, I have a 556 as well. I don't have an 856. But those all pretty much cost significantly more than this model. Really, the bottom line here is you're getting 856 like specs, but costing about half the price of the 556. So even less than the kind of the lesser model, and it's still made in Germany, and it's quite in-house. It doesn't have, a lot of those special technologies, but honestly, a lot of that stuff is pretty frivolous at the end of the day. Are you really using some of the capsule technology or anything like that? It's also another point of failure and another thing you have to renew and maintain. Here you're getting something very, very straightforward, very, very handsome, and extremely capable, all for a relatively low price. Of course, there's always going to be the translation from euro to US dollar and this and that, which will fluctuate. But I mean, generally for a watch that is in kind of that $600 range, this is an insane amount of value. You might find somebody that farms a similar thing out to to China or Singapore as far as manufacturing, and honestly, it's not going to be that far off in price to this. And this is like German to a T, and in all the best ways as far as the craftsmanship goes, the attention to detail, and really just that beautiful minimalist, sterile aesthetic, really well balanced. And for me, I'm a sucker for watches with a no date layout. Date complications do sell watches, but for the enthusiast, when you find something with a no date option, you kind of have to pounce on it, and that's exactly what I did. So with that said, if you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this, and definitely don't forget to let me know what you guys think in the comments below. You like it? You dig it? What are your thoughts? Let me know. Thanks, guys.